Is there a case to be made, do you think, that he doesn't want to go home?
Sort of went out for that pack of cigarettes like one too many times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Pretty
right.
much. Like, dude,
There's always
pull it
another
together.
step.
She's holding him captive, and she just
Yeah,
exactly.
the incredibly.
I mean, that's the question, right?
Quote Richard's quoting quote fingers, right? Yeah, it wasn't my fault, baby. You know, amazing. The plot of the Odyssey is not long in the telling. A man has been away from home for many years. Poseidon is on the watch for him. He is all alone. As for the situation at home, his goods are being laid waste by the suitors, who plot against his son. After a storm-tossed journey, he returns home, where he reveals himself, destroys his enemies, and is saved. So that's Aristotle quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty tight.
Yeah,
We got to get him on the pod.
yeah. I'll get my people on it. So, one thing that's potentially a bit odd about the Odyssey is it doesn't actually start with Odysseus. Instead, it starts with his son and his wife and his rivals, but mainly his son, Telemachus. As we know, Odysseus is this great hero. Well, we'll get to that question in a bit, actually, but he's certainly impressive at the very least. And so the other thing that's potentially a little bit odd is the son maybe doesn't seem all that Odyssean.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. It's like the genetics got a little diluted. You have Odysseus, who's like the most cunning man in the land, super strong, extremely good looking. And then you have Telemachus, who is his son, who was only a few years old when Odysseus left, right? So Odysseus left for the Trojan War. By the time he gets back, he was gone for 20 years. We're picking up sort of near the end of that. So our experience of Telemachus is that presumably sort of a young 20-year-old. But we're told pretty early on that he doesn't really know how to fight. And this may not seem strange now, but looking back, I mean, young 20s, you're supposed to be at like the peak of manhood, right? And like presumably the great warriors have already sort of made their name by then, are already super skilled fighters. So the fact that he can't fight off the suitors, for instance, by himself, right? His mom is sort of being terrorized by these many suitors, many dozens of suitors who are just now living in her house and eating all her food. And he has this sort of bizarre relationship with them where he's sort of friendly with them, tries to stick up for his mom if they're overly rude or aggressive, but just can't really hold his own against them. And
are they his age, the suitors, as well? Like, because that's an extra
some of
strange
them must
dynamic,
be, right?
right? I think Antinous is talked about as a young man. So it's really like you've got all dozens of these guys in your house, and they're like, "I'm gonna f your mom," basically.
Yeah,
and they're
like
some of
making
them are
fun
your
of
peers
and stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't think of the age gap between Penelope and the suits.
Well, she must be 40 or something, right? Roughly, or late 30s,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Well, he's been away for 20 years.
But presumably they got married quite young, I would imagine, right? But she's still described as extremely beautiful and young.
I mean, Telemachus is kind of coming across as a little bitch, right? Like, at the start at least. I was surprised how much. I grabbed some texts in there. So, like, this is Telemachus. There is no man to save the house. No man like Odysseus. I cannot fight against them. I would be useless. I have no training. If I had the power, I'd do it. It is unbearable what they have done. They've ruined my whole house. It is not fair. You suitors all should feel ashamed. So he's super annoyed, but he can't do it. And it's kind of, he is like 20, which doesn't feel that young, right? And I sort of wondered like why he's such a, weakling. And I suppose it's a way to set up like the political instability, at home, which maybe could get overshadowed otherwise because, he's like, I've got this missing father and this missing husband, right? And then but also what's going on is like the kingdom's been overrun by these bastards, really. And Telemachus can't deal with it. And I suppose it sets up a contrast with Telemachus and Odysseus and sets up this absolute need for Odysseus to return. I think even Athena finds out about what's happening. She's like, this is monstrous. We need Odysseus to come back and to sort this out. So just like it sort of sets up a big need for the story.
This is making me realize that I'm not sure to what extent lineages are important for the Greeks. For instance, say like medieval England, you think of kings and their lineages, right? And like it's important that the king's son inherits the throne and continues to carry the family honor. And typically last names are important here, right? Because you want to know who's related to who. But for one, in the Odyssey, many people are just referred to as either their first name or a solo name: Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus, Laertes, right? You don't know who is related to who just by
Usually
their
with a
names.
catchy nickname, right? Like Badass Benny.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Badass Benny, or sleek tongued Odysseus or something.
Yeah.
And so, but now I'm wondering, are lineages just not an important?
I think the opposite. I think they're hugely important. I think it's a hugely important theme, and maybe you could even argue is the main theme. Well, maybe not the main theme, but
you'd think in some sense then the fact that Odysseus's son is like a loser by all of their standards and unable to stand up for himself and his family, wouldn't that sort of bring shame to Odysseus? But in fact, when he gets home and teams up with his son, he doesn't seem to be mad at him in any way, right? He seems to just accept that, okay, this kid can't handle it. He's not as sharp or as strong as
well, he
me.
was a kid, right?
And
Yeah, can we just stop to defend Telemachus for a second? Like,
no.
I didn't realize until the Suitor fight at the end that there's 50 or 60 of these guys.
I think I've into 108.
Oh, really? Okay.
Quoted somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
it's a
where
lot.
they got. I didn't see that. But
So, like, yeah, I mean, even imagine Telemachus is just as good a warrior and just as clever as Odysseus. There's basically nothing that he can do about it either way. I mean, maybe there is. All problems are soluble. But, like, it's not at all surprising that he needs help from Odysseus, and crucially, not just from Odysseus. The gods also
From Athena,
massively put their thumbs on the scale, which we'll get to when we talk about how the suitors actually get defeated. Yeah, I just want to push back slightly. Like, yeah, he's meant to be kind of like and not a fully formed man or something, but I don't think he's meant to be contemptible or pitiable by
he's like a
Odysseus
kid.
or by anyone else.
It is a bit funny, I suppose, that he's 20, and I suppose it's because Odysseus has been away for so long. Sometimes I wonder, did he need to be away for 20 years? Because it makes a few things like, Telemachus is a little old, and like the dog, surely it's pretty old for a dog, and things like that. And just like, just make it 15 years sort of thing. Because he's 10 years at the war and 10 years trip.
Yeah.
And he's not grown up with a father figure either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he has other people like Laertes and the swineherd and maybe some other good masculine figures, but he doesn't actually have a dad.
Yeah, so there's a few threads I want to pick up on here. So I just thought another reason why he's kind of set up as weak at the front, I said to compare to Odysseus, but there is this interesting line. Okay, well, actually, this ties both questions. So Benny asked about lineages, and I think that actually is a huge reason why Telemachus leaves home. Because one, he wants to find out if his father Odysseus is alive, but two, he wants to find out if his father Odysseus is his father. Like, that's important to him, like, for his identity, and just like, am I king and am I the ruler? So like,
you can't just spit in a tube in those days.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, ask some ancient king.
Yeah, so he asked people at the start, and someone's like, "Yeah, you resemble him. You're pretty tall." And Telemachus says like explicitly, like, "I'm not sure." Like, I think I'll quote him here.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I'm an idiot and I can't fight.
Yeah, I know. He's like, you're worried about it. Yeah.
Also implying that his mom might be a hoe. No one trusts Penelope. She's never given anyone reason to doubt them. Even her own son.
Wait, she's got 30 guys, man. She's stringing along.
Yeah.
But he just hasn't grown up with a father, right? And I think he explicitly says, "My mother says I'm a son, but I cannot be sure since no one knows his own beginning." And so he wants to find that out, and he goes overseas and he meets Nestor and Pylos, and then he goes and meets Menelaus, famous from Troy, and Iliad, and Helen, even more famous. And I think Helen's the one that recognizes him. She has him for a dead ringer. She's like, "Man, like, I've never seen someone who looks so much like Odysseus." And it's like, so I think, that's like confirmation. Like, you don't have DNA tests back then, and it's when you look like someone. So
can we just also, while we're in Sparta visiting Menelaus and Helen, can we just pause for 1 second on the fact that it's insane that the entire Iliad was caused by Helen running away with a prince of Troy and causing a war, and then when the when the Greeks win the war, she just goes back home with Menelaus, and now they're like a happy family again.
No,
Like, it's wild, dude. And
I think there is a slight question mark on how complicit she was running away.
Yeah, wasn't she kidnapped, or did she go?
It's kind of like, but she kind of loved them maybe as well. But I even noticed like it was a bit awkward. I think at one point when they're talking about, it's like someone brings up Troy, right? And she's kind of like, this. I think that she ends up drugging the drink. Like let's have a bit of a party. Yes, I think that's kind of part of it.
shit.
Yeah, and so also, I mean, there was this other interesting quote. I was just sort of rereading the first 4 books yesterday, and there's this interesting quote where Athena questions Odysseus, and it's when she's questioning his lineage. I mean, here's Fagel saying it, like, few sons are equals of their fathers. Most fall short, all too few surpass them. And Wilson says, it is rare for sons to be like fathers. Only a few are better, most are worse, which has a slightly different meaning. And Lattimore has to be equals of. Yeah, it's just kind of, there's almost like this kind of Freudian, Oedipus complex going on here that like is really setting up like Telemachus, you're not going to measure up to Odysseus. It's like he's like the greatest father you can have, and like she's surely going to have hang-ups. And then I wondered if Telemachus even wanted Odysseus to return, which I think he does, like, obviously in the later books. But I was talking to my partner around there, and she grew up without a father, and she was sort of saying there is this kind of tension inside you, part of you wants him just to be gone forever. And like, there's this crisis of not having him in your life, but then there's also this like crisis of like meeting him. Because Telemachus almost like, he seems to go back and forth. He's not like, he doesn't start off as super hopeless and then hopeful. At the start, he's kind of like, I think Odysseus is not my father or dead. And then he's like, then he goes away. He's like, I'm going to find him. And then later on, like Athena says he's alive, and he like doesn't believe Athena, and he's just kind of like questioning it again. And I sort of thought he was to and fro a little bit.
We should also say that Athena nudges him, or pushes him rather, to go try and find Odysseus. It's not of his own accord. Athena visits him and says, you now should go look for your father, go look for news of his returning. And I think his motives are maybe a little murkier than you're making them out to be. I think part of it is just selfishness, in the sense that, you want to know if you're king. And so, you want to know if your dad's dead or if he's coming home. And like, these suitors are making your life hell. So if your dad came back and was able to drive them away, that would be great for your family, right? So I get the sense it's less about lineage in the sense of, I need to know who my father is. And it's more the practicalities of just wanting him back to make day-to-day life better. But again, he doesn't even do this of his own accord. Athena needs to come down and say, I'll help you, go look for news of your dad. Here's what you should do. She helps him get a boat. She helps him go to Pylos and Sparta in the first place, make sure everything kind of works out for him, because he's a pussy and can't make things work out for himself. So yeah, I'm still not super impressed with it.
One answer for why he left is just because Athena told him to, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, why not earlier, right? I mean, he's been a fully grown adult now for several years.
I mean, I think it's also setting up growth for later on when he returns, right?
And his histrionics, I think they're surprising because that's the first thing you encounter in the book. Like you said, Cam, it's set in media res and it begins with Telemachus, and you're like, oh man, these Greek heroes are not so tough. But then, as we'll come to later, that's actually not unusual at all. There's a lot of histrionics from tough guys throughout this book. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree in that respect. And that's not actually a sign of lacking manliness or heroism or courage or whatever. The fact that you bemoan your misfortune and cry and stuff like that. Yeah. But I wanted to say one other point, which is this reminded me a little bit of the judge's point in Blood Meridian about a man whose father is killed being euchred out of his patrimony, which is that they're just being lionized and eulogized, and in a way that might not be in touch with how they were as a man, their pettiness and their meanness and faults and flaws. And so Telemachus has the worst of both worlds, where he doesn't have a father to provide him any help or direction in growing up. And his father's shoes are so big to fill, right? Like, everyone is always talking about how wonderful he is. Like, man, that's hard to live up to. Of course he's going to be a failson, or, whatever the Greek equivalent of selling nudes on OnlyFans or whatever, right? Like, it's inevitable. Like, it's amazing that he does as well as he does, I reckon. Well, no, that's too far. We should still look down on him a little bit, but it's not like all that surprising.
But yeah, you're right. Like he's grown up without a father, so he kind of doesn't know. Because I think that's the other reason why. Well, maybe not the reason why he left, but it's one thing he got away from going. So like before he goes, Eurycleia. So she's the old nurse, sort of slave nurse that is later famous for washing feet. We might talk about later, washing Odysseus' feet. But she even says, like, sweet child, like, why are you going? She's like, you're the only child. So he's the heir. Like, if Odysseus isn't coming back, like, he's the only one left. Albeit he's not sure about that. But if he leaves, like, it's going to be even worse, probably, for his mum and the suitors. So, like, there's this risk of going. Like why are you even going? And then I just wanted to think, like, was it even worth going? But I think one thing, he found out that he's related, but the other thing he got away is he kind of learned what it's like to rule a kingdom. Like he doesn't know that because he hasn't had Odysseus, and he's seen the opposite of just like people being absolutely terrible at home. But then he goes and he sees kind of two successful kingdoms being ruled, and this whole thing of like gift giving and bring gifts and like host hospitality and all that. And so he has kind of learned and grown in that sense. And I think at first I felt like he didn't grow that much, maybe because I'm just not valuing that stuff enough as being like the kind of the most important virtue.
Yeah. He was scared to go up in front of those guys and speak his piece and say who he was and so on. And then he had to confront his fear and do some public speaking. And yeah, exactly. He wins them over and gets their aid and so on. So there is some character development right from the outset. And also Athena sets him on his path, but she's not like making every single thing happen. He plays his part well, I think.
I did, as you guys know, I've just been rereading some of Infinite Jest this last week, making fan art. And there is this little...
When are you not rereading Infinite Jest?
Exactly. But there is this little Telemachus reference in there that I didn't catch, obviously, the first time. But it's when Hal, the main character, is on the phone to his brother. And he's clipping his nails and he's not really listening. And at one point he says, Hal says, this seems like an exercise in telemachry, like spelt like Telemachus. And then Oren goes, do you mean telemetry? Which is like this classic Wallacean word that you have to look up and you don't really know. But it means like collecting data from various sources and bringing them in a centralized location. So it like comes across as this like innocent like malapropism, but then you kind of think like, well, Wallace wouldn't have done that accidentally, but Hal himself as well. Like, he's a verbal genius, and that would be odd, him saying a word that doesn't even exist really. But and then you just think like there are similarities, like Hal's grown up without a father, and Telemachus thinks his father's dead. Yeah, there's maybe a bigger discussion when we're talking about Infinite Jest, maybe of those parallels. But okay, so that's maybe enough of Telemachus. I did see that apparently there is like this lost epic out there called the Telemachy, potentially. That's just lost through the ages.
I thought the first few books were called the Telemachy, or is that
they get called that as well. I don't think I think that was maybe like after the fact. But I think there's this other epic that's like, all about him. Yeah. So.
Man, they were doing like reboots and sequels.
yeah. Fast and the Furious 7.
Yeah, the big studios just trying to print more money.
Yeah, why don't we make one about Telemachus? Yeah. The
man. So let me ask you guys this. How would the main themes and the main takeaways of the book be different if you just skipped right to Odysseus' story? So if you just omitted Telemachus's journey for the first few chapters. You started the book with Odysseus like arriving to the island of Sherry or whatever, book 5 basically, and then you only learn he has this sort of weakling son when he actually gets back to Ithaca and is ready to fight the suitors. Would things actually be any different?
I saw someone online even recommending that. It was one of those viral posts. She's like, if you want to read Odysseus, Odyssey, like here, she, like 5 tweets down, she was like, and if you want to, like, skip the first 4, like if you want to skip to the action, which, you know, it's probably all right.
No, I think you need to set up Odysseus's problem that he's trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
Before you meet Odysseus, it's helpful to know where is he from, what's the situation that needs to be resolved by the end of this book. Set that up for a few books, then go to Odysseus, and then you can see how he might struggle to solve that, and how his son probably not going to get it done in his absence. So I like it. I mean, I got other complaints about some chapters that could be cut from this book that we might get to later. The first 4
so
is not. It's just
set
one
in
of them.
setting though. You don't think Telemachus, like by that account, Telemachus isn't actually adding that much to the story. It's just basically setting up the actual situation in the of the book, right? And it seems like you could do that faster, right? When Athena goes to petition Zeus to let Odysseus escape Calypso's clutches on Ogygia, presumably she could give that background. Like, look, this man has been gone from his family for 20 years. His home is being besmirched by 108 suitors who are all trying to marry his wife. He's suffered enough. Let him go home. That's all. Yeah, that's all you'd really need to set up the problem, right? You don't need his son traveling, talking to Nestor, talking to Menelaus. It is kind of odd, to be honest. Like, I'm not quite sure what to make of the whole thing.
Well, since you bring up, like, the question of pacing is fascinating throughout this book, and I think it does tell us something about what's important to these people, because you get these first 4 books which set up this situation in detail, and then far more egregiously, in my opinion, at the end when Odysseus finally gets back to Ithaca, you get like 10 more books about him chasing out the suitors in an incredibly sort of convoluted, some would say unnecessarily detailed and convoluted way. So that makes, I think, well over half the book is about resolving this problem. And then his actual adventures, sometimes they just skim over things that sound fascinating, that sound like they could be a whole book in and of themselves. He's fought against some cool monster, or even on the island with Circe, it's not described for all that long.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you can imagine if you're like a studio head today, you could easily do like a Monster of the Week Odysseus show where one week it's the Cyclops episode, and another week it's Circe, and another week it's Calypso, and then all the tales that get told, each of those could be like a frame story. And I'd love to hear more about those, but those are just like little asides, and then there's so much detail paid to the cleansing of the suitors, basically. I mean, it must be something to do with what they prioritize. That's my best guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's funny because that's what most people know about the Odyssey, right? There's all those stories. He conquered all these monsters and things with his cleverness, and that's kind of what you know about it. And then you read it, and it's like, you know, a few books, and often in the context of he's telling stories. You know, the main context is where he's staying, and these are just he's recounting them. And and the Odyssey is mainly about different political situations, and just hosting and you know, welcoming your guests and hospitality, and you know, and telling stories and stuff like that, which I suppose was, you know, one of the important virtues and values of the time of you know, how a proper king should act. And then, you know, sprinkle in some cool adventures in between.
It's annoying that they skip literally the most exciting thing that happens in Telemachus's storyline, which is that it's the suitors plan to ambush him on the way back from Sparta, and then we never hear about it. So book 4 ends with them putting that plan into action, and then we jump right to Odysseus and his story, and then I guess we're just supposed to think that Athena sort of unraveled their plans and didn't let him and his crew be ambushed. But book 3 and 4 were just totally building up to this fact that the suitors were unhappy that he was going to look for news of his father and wanted to kill him, which I thought was going to result in some cool scene where, he finally had to fight someone and prove his mettle or something, but no, it just, the whole thing unravels and then we never hear about it again. It's extremely
We
odd.
do hear about it at the beginning of the ending section, but you're right, it's a total damp squib. They're just like, oh, and then they must have not have been able to find him and they got back, and they're pulling up on the beach now, and it's like, oh, okay, it's a bit of a violation of Chekhov's gun, but we've got to give Homer some credit,
Yeah.
It's crazy how good the story is, in spite of the occasional loose end here and there.
I just saw this. Have you guys? This is like game show where the question is some of those like quiz game show, and the question is like in his epic poems, like Homer often refers to nectar as the drink of the gods, and what food? And it goes to contestant. The contestant is like, well, I know he likes donuts, Greg. He's like, I'm gonna lock in donuts. And you can see the host like awesome. Face just like scrunch up. Yeah.
It's fucking awesome. All right, should we talk a bit about Odysseus?
Yeah. Take us.
Yeah. So obviously, in many respects, Odysseus is the prototypical Homeric hero, right? He's strong, cunning, brave, exactly what you'd expect of sort of the perfect Greek specimen. And so then I was trying to think, well, okay, is the narration glowing about him the whole time? Like, do they only talk about his virtues, and is everything he does tinged with respect and admiration? And then I was thinking, no. So there are times when it feels like the narration is sort of negative about him, sort of implying that he probably fucked up. And
he's complicated.
A few of those a few of those seem to be around the Cyclops, right? When they're almost escaped. We talked a bit about this last time. They've almost escaped, and he turns around and taunts the Cyclops, and then that almost gets them caught again. Then there's the whole thing where he's sort of secretive with his men about the bag of wind that Aeolus gave him, which happened pretty quickly, but basically he didn't tell his men what the bag contained. The bag was given to him to help them speed their way back to Ithaca and to make the.
And you can trust those bitches, man.
Yeah, it doesn't tell his men what's in the bag. They think it's treasure. When he's asleep one night, they open it and the winds escape and then push them way off course again. And hence.
Imagine like a giant whoopee cushion.
Yeah, exactly. That's honestly what I was thinking.
Open the bag. It was a chair.
Yeah, you can definitely imagine the animated version of that where it's just the bag volume of ship pushed all around the world. And then maybe at the end when he's maybe slightly too bloodthirsty and wants to kill the townsfolk who are railing against him because he had taken revenge on the suitors and killed them all. And then Athena has to step in and stop there being more bloodshed. So you could maybe argue that's sort of a time when he's taking things too far. And so there's some parts where he's maybe portrayed in a negative light. And then I was thinking, okay, is there a case to be made, do you think, that he doesn't want to go home? Where he's like doing all this, he's having adventures with his men. Maybe he wanted to stay with Calypso on Ogygia permanently or something. I'm not sure if you can summon that sort of textual evidence, but I'm curious what you guys think.
Sort of went out for that pack of cigarettes like one too many times, right?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. Like, dude,
there's always another step. Yeah. I mean, I think with Calypso on the island, so she's this goddess that, he's there for ages, I think. Like, he's there for seven of the 10 years.
She's holding him captive, and she just
exactly.
Be incredibly.
I mean, that's the question, right?
Richard's quoting quote fingers, right? Yeah. It wasn't my fault, baby.
Amazing. She was gorgeous. It was my biology.
And I would go down to the seashore and I would sit there and stare at the horizon and cry every day. I promise you.
I never let her give me head on the side of the bed. Yeah, so I mean, I think there is a bit of that. Like, he's not there in his free will. She's not letting him go. Does Rich want to maybe talk about what he thinks a Homeric hero is? Also, some key attributes.
Yeah, Rich would like to do that. I think the way that Rich will approach it is that I want to compare like what I had in my head, my preconception of what a Homeric hero is, and then how it was subverted or refined a little bit from actually reading this book more carefully. So I think the idea I had in my head is very much coming from, especially like Bronze Age Perverts book, which I read a year ago or something, and this sort of Nietzsche light stuff that we've talked about the will to power, and Dostoevsky's conception of the extraordinary man, which we talked about for the better part of an episode in Crime and Punishment series. But the central idea is just that you are this person who is not concerned with maximizing the goodness of your actions. You just sort of just do whatever pleases you and exert your will and influence over the world and everything in it, which means like physically claiming space, like taking dominion over things, over geography, over people. And that is the highest form of morality. And so partly that aligns with Odysseus' behavior. So we talked about a couple of the traits last week, which were arete. How do you say that? Arete?
Yeah. Don't ask me, man.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, pursuit of excellence, and kleos in particular, which is like this desire to become famous and to have your name remembered, to seek glory by doing great things, and to have others respect you and give you the respect that is due. This kind of mafioso respect economy thing. So that's all definitely true. One thing that slightly surprised me is I think those are more about adherence to social norms in some way rather than trying to rebel against them, because you still are trying to kind of impress people or want people to talk about you. You're quite interested in other people's conception of you, which seems like somewhat at odds with what I would consider a true heroic figure, or at least my preconceived notion of what a true heroic figure would be like. Yeah, here are some more meaningful ways in which my expectation was subverted. The first I mentioned before is that, like a small thing maybe, but Odysseus cries like a baby, right? Like,
Yeah.
seriously.
Described
Like,
as wailing at one point, I think.
he's wailing, he's sobbing, he's ugly crying. And it's not once. It's like, I really wanted to count up all
7 years on the island, and then later when he's hearing the poet, and it's all the time.
Yeah. I wanted to count up all the instances, but it must have been 10 times, I reckon. And it's accompanied by sort of emo style self-pity, where he's always talking about how he's the unluckiest man alive and woe is me. And it's just interesting how that particular notion of masculinity has varied so much throughout history. And like when if I've read Bronze Age Pervert, I can't imagine him, like, it's not what springs to mind, the idea of someone sort of being very self-pitying and very emotional and willing to weep over your own plight and the plight of others. Like, he's really sad about his bros who got killed, and he's really sad about losing his men, at least some of the time. And it's not just him. Also, it's like his soldiers cry at least one time that I noticed. So he's not even unusual in that respect.
I suppose this is the reconciliation that he kind of does something about it. You know, he has this kind of will to power type thing of, conquering or taking revenge on his enemies, really, and just showing like he's not. I mean, he gets help from the god, I suppose, but yeah, because my understanding of sort of BAP style stuff is kind of, and Nietzsche is this kind of rejection of this probably Christian influence, like egalitarian kind of norms, right? And it's just less concern or no concern of that, and it's just it's more about this vitality and glory and because I mean, remember the first thing he does on his journey, actually, they get blown off course and they just conquer like the nearby city. So they're in Troy and they get blown up to Thracian coast, and it's the Cicones or Cicones. He just whacks them, right? And he's not like, I remember that's one of the first things he tells Penelope when he gets back telling stories, like, yeah, no, we went there, raided the city, and like again going back to potentially some of his flaws, like I think they stay there too long, right? Well, he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
That's his other thing with it. It's like he doesn't seem to have control over his troops.
Yeah.
Like there's several
Yeah.
mutinies. Like right at the
Yeah.
start, they want to stay there, and he's like, no, we need to go. And then of course they stay and they get raided. And then as you said, it's like he's asleep with this bag of wind, and then like his right hand man, like there's fucking names, man. Eurymachus and Eurylochus. I think Eurylochus is the one away with Odysseus. He's like his right hand man, but he's always trying to one up him, Like he's like, let's open the bag.
Yeah.
The sun god's cattle. Do not eat the cattle.
Yeah,
Do not eat the cattle. Do not eat the fucking cattle.
And they just have to wait. It's funny, they know the prophecy, like this will definitely kill you, and they're like, oh man, sick of fish.
Yeah.
Sick of fish. Yeah.
But you are right that, okay, so basically Bronze Age heroism is much more complicated than I was led to believe through the silly BAP stuff. It's much more nuanced, and I'm way more sympathetic to Emily Wilson actually reading some moral complication or into these characters and into this text, which I think it's not a stretch, and it does exist in there, because you have Odysseus, who's clearly being pointed out as displaying hubris, right? And his actions are condemned. So there's lots of bloodthirstiness, but there's also lots of wistfulness about wanting to escape from violence to some degree. And there's a lot of messaging around trying to control your urges and not merely act upon your base instincts, but actually sublimate them to second order consequences, right? Like there's obviously the avoiding the sirens, the lotus eaters, feasting at Circe's house, not eating the sun god's cattle. That's the most obvious one, which sort of cuts against BAP's point somewhat, I think, where you actually, or maybe it doesn't, maybe it's more just like if you want to keep your eye on the prize, you have to avoid these petty self-gratifying pleasures if you want to actually achieve the big second, third, nth order outcomes. It's kind of like the Greek marshmallow test or something, right? But way more, but a bit more hardcore. Can you self-sacrifice now to get the big reward later?
You're like,
which is not being murdered by someone, or
either don't have the marshmallow and you'll get home, or have one now and the sun god will kill you.
Yeah,
for sure.
Kill you and all of your men.
I did wonder about this addiction stuff. So you have the second place they go to is the land of the lotus eaters, and it's just these lotus plants that you eat and just want to chill and not leave. And then you have the famous sirens, which everyone knows about. It's funny, I think I just reminded of how old this kind of theme is. This kind of battling with second, third order desires, as old as we have in literature. And I think one form of self-control in the literature, it gets called Odyssean self-control. It's like so Odyssean ties himself to the mast as his way of not falling victim to his impulse. And that's what we do when we, get all the chocolate out of the house or download some app. That means you can't, go on social media. And it was funny. So us three, in the book club, we all met kind of because we read David Deutsch's Beginning of Infinity and liked it, and it is a great book, one of the best along there with Homer and stuff. But, there's also a bunch of batshit crazy stuff in there, or seemingly batshit crazy stuff. And one of them is kind of implicit in there, and it's in his work is this disbelief in this issue of addiction and or maybe if I was to phrase it differently, is this thought that everything you do is active, and there's no issue of passive consumption, doom scrolling or video gaming or all that stuff, which the big theme of Infinite Jest. And I think there's some truth there. Sometimes we low status stuff we view as kind of this kind of passive consumption, but it's just kind of lower status. But as soon as it's higher status, if it's chess or piano or something, if you're doing that every day, everyone's oh, that's great. You're not addicted to it. So I think there's some truth there, but it kind of goes too far as well. And I set up a lot of the way I live. I do these Pomodoro things, or I go out of the house to do my flashcards, or I mean, part of this bloody book club we do is like this commitment device to read like tough stuff and like not get distracted by the lotus flowers and the sirens and stuff, which like always happens, right? You see these like images online of like this beautiful like home library and there's like beautiful chair, and like the first thought is like it's just sort of tweet just saying around like, just I can't wait to get home after a long shift and like doom scroll there. I think the social dilemma type worries like are real, and it's just interesting, you know, how old.
And how sophisticated the problem solving is here, because as you point out, I actually used this. I used a lot of Odysseus's story when I was writing my book in the section on akrasia, which is sort of also the Greek name for that state, not necessarily of addiction, but of having two competing desires in your mind at the same time, of wanting to do something on some base or instinctive level, and of not wanting to do it because it interferes with whatever your long-term goals are. Odysseus is like, the Greeks were really clever about this stuff. The idea of tying himself to the mast, of blocking his sailor's ears, and like all the various other tricks that they use to sort of bind themselves. I still do things exactly like that today. The Ulysses pacts, they call them.
They got like the dynamic, like exactly right?
Yeah, and I also came to believe that like my take on this is that there is no such thing as willpower, really. That all you ever do is guide and channel your impulses in one direction or another. And so the way to do that is to change your incentive structure and environment accordingly to channel your energy in one direction or another. But I don't believe that. I think I'm like a willpower extremist, that I literally don't really think willpower exists. I think you can just make your life easier or harder through your choice architecture and these kind of contracts.
Not sure if I'd go that far, but I sort of take your point that most of it, at the very least, is this kind of just changing.
Yeah. Well, and doing what you think is fun, but the secret is that you can tweak various variables to make things more or less fun, right? Make things that you don't want to do less fun, and make things that you do want to do more fun. Then it becomes more or less effortless, rather than like trying to fight against your own self all the time, which I personally have never managed to succeed with at all. Like, I think I've never developed any more willpower. I've only ever used Odyssean style tricks.
Yeah, I need to do it. Like, man, I got thin for your wedding in like 2 weeks since I've been back. 3 weeks, just going straight downhill. I'm in the ice creams. We've got someone staying with us at the moment, and apparently she's like, man, Cameron goes through a lot of ice cream. My nickname used to be two can cams. I always got two drunks.
What's interesting about especially the Ulysses pact, where he asks his men to tie him to the siren or to the mast so that he can still hear the sirens, but they can go by safely, is that the problem solving involves still letting yourself partake like in the pleasure of the activity.
Yeah.
Which we've actually lost a bit of that today, I think. Like, I think a lot of this problem solving now has like this moral tone as well, where it's you should deprive yourself of something because it's good for you, and experiencing that thing in and of itself is just, now it's bad, it's icky, right? But Odysseus's problem solving is much more nuanced. It's, no, I'm gonna experience as much of the good thing as possible, but I'm just gonna make it so that like the second order consequences are now like manageable. So I know I can get myself out of the situation when needed. So, I'm gonna eat the junk food.
So you're just saying I should eat
junk
the
food
ice cream
is great, but
and vomit it up.
I don't fill my fridge with ice cream like Cam, because then I'm never going to stop eating the ice cream. And I feel like there's now sort of like just moral overtones with this sort of problem solving, where there's this claim that deprivation in and of itself is a good thing. Whereas that's not what's being done in the Odyssey, right? It's like deprivation is necessary insofar as it helps you avoid certain problems, but deprivation in and of itself is no good, because here, like, experiencing pleasure is still a good thing. And I guess that's another theme in general, is just the desire for pleasurable activities, right? Like good food, good sex, good visits, being tanned and oiled up all the time, like that.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Massages, like all this stuff. Yeah, it sounds great.
These
Especially
guys
food.
love to party, yeah. They're always feasting. They're always
Yeah.
drinking wine as sweet as honey. They're
Yeah.
always slaughtering fat young calves.
Yeah. No, it's enough to make me want to eat meat again. God damn it.
On Circe's island, they feast nonstop for 1 year.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know.
don't you have a wife? Don't you have a wife and child that you're desperate to get home to?
Yeah, actually, that's a good piece of evidence to maybe bolster what I was saying earlier. I mean, it's maybe hard to make it, but there's some sort of reading of this where you can argue that he doesn't really
Takes his
want
time.
to go home. Like, yeah, he's taking his sweet time.
Yeah, I think you can't go fully there because at one point, like Calypso, so Calypso is this like kind of half goddess nymph, and so is Circe, but she's more kind of a witch. That
Mhm.
But Calypso asks, like, she wants him to stay there. She like loves him, and she's like, "I'll give you immortal life, and this is beautiful, and like I'm beautiful." And he even concedes that. He's like, "Yeah, you're
You're hotter than Penelope.
yeah, you're probably hotter than my wife. You are a goddess." But he's like, "I want to go home." Like he does want to go home. Like, but I kind of know what you mean. Like he's taking his time. He's sort of having his cake and eating it too. He's like, one more trip.
The Circe one is slightly different though, because she's not controlling him and keeping him trapped. They're just straight up staying there having a great time.
Well, maybe I get the timeline wrong, but like, so she's this witch that turns like his squad to pigs, and then he wants to go save them, and
Which he has to have sex with her, unfortunately.
that's the only way. Well, he has to drink the potion, so who knows what was in there, right? They put in some Molly, I think it's called.
It's a Molly. Oh yeah.
Yeah. It was like a little
Awesome.
Fluid bonding.
But yeah, at one point, I think even Hermes the god says, like, she asks you to get in bed. He says, like, make sure you promise an oath to like get home or some shit. Like, it almost does sound part of the deal. Yeah, I suppose that's the other temptation he's dealing with.
So yeah, I mean, one way to resolve this, I guess, Cam, like you said, is to say, okay, he actually does want to get home, and that's why he denies Calypso's offer, or declines rather Calypso's offer of immortality. But another way to read it is that he just knows that that's a virtue that like all good Greeks are supposed to embody. Like you're supposed to embark on this journey of nostos, I think it's called, which is homecoming, right? And that is what you're supposed to do, but that his actual desire is maybe to stay with Calypso on the island. And then so it's just sort of a moral duty that he has to go home. But if he could choose, if he could mold the world as he wanted it, he would actually become a god. Because otherwise you have to ask, why wouldn't he become a god, right? She's offering him like a great life of immortality and stuff. Like why do we think he says no to that?
Yeah, well, there is this question: how much he wants to go home to his wife, and how much he wants to go home to his kingdom. But I think, I mean, yeah, the simple answer is, whether it's his duty or not. But being home is the most important thing to him, and it is this like deep theme, for people, right, of wanting to return home after this big journey.
I get the sense that it's less to do with affection for his wife and family, and it's more to do with assuming the mantle of reassuming the mantle of king of Ithaca as his sort of duty to that land. Like, I know he does feel emotionally attached to it, but
I think that's right. I think it's both, but like I think that's a big part of it for sure. Like, yes, to get back and be king, and there's kingdoms in disrepair.
Yeah, take back his place in the world and have all of his resources back at his command to bring home treasure, etc. Right? So I'm not sure how much of it is the intrinsic allure of home itself versus like the extrinsic sort of social status type stuff of having your correct position in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he does want to get back to his wife as well. Like, it certainly sets up, like, it directly contrasts with Agamemnon, who was also at the Battle of Troy and leaves to go home. And his wife Clytemnestra has left him for another man, cheated on him, and they ambush him and kill him. And Odysseus talks to him in the underworld, and he's just saying, like, damn, she got me, sort of like. And yeah, and but it like sets up a direct kind of foil or contrast of like his wife. One was like Her fidelity was not pure, but also like they killed him, and like watch out, like when you get home, watch out. So he kind of knows that he can't trust everyone when he gets back. He knows it's going to be dangerous, but he wants to get revenge. I think that's driving him, and he also, he wants his wife to be faithful and there for him as well. I think the text is probably telling us that.
Is this a good time to talk about like how long is a reasonable period of time to
move on
your missing husband before you move on?
Yeah,
20 years, and you've probably been together for like 5 years, maybe. So
yeah,
I mean,
it's crazy.
I mean, I have thought about that. I mean, I mentioned this last time, but I was just watching a really good TV show, Prisoners of War, which Homeland is based on, where two soldiers are captive away for 14 years and both finally return in Israel. This is like an early 2000s TV show. And they both have wives, and one has two young kids who he hasn't been a part of. And yeah, there's just really strong Odyssean themes. One of the wives has left him for her brother in this case, but and the other one stayed. And, everyone hates the wife that left her. Like, she kind of betrayed him. And that was like his one hope, was like he's thinking somewhere, and he gets back, and they're like, that's like, she's left him. But then also you see the other wife, and she stayed, but like she's had a tough time. And like, what happens if he never returned, right? She's kind of wasted her life. I mean, Penelope at one point describes what it was like for her. It was like being away at a shipwreck. Like it's a journey for her as well. Yeah, and 20 years is a long time.
Yeah, this is the closest I get to the feeling that the polyamory people have a point, which is that like, if you really love someone, you really care about their well-being, you want them to be happy, even if it means them taking another partner, getting remarried or whatever. Like, it's much clearer with death, right? Like, if I died, I would want Phoebe to remarry. Like, yeah, because I would want her to have a good life. But if I was merely missing for a long time, I still would. It's just that it would be like so heartbreaking to get home and be.
Well, even in this TV show, he's away and he's in captive, and he sees the newspaper, because it's massive news, and like he just like that takes away everything. Like that was worse than any of the torture he'd had in the TV show. That like his wife is not waiting for him the same way that he's waiting for her. I mean, there is this question of how much is, how much is Odysseus, keep him clean, but
That's not much of a question.
No, but I think at one point it says he's captive with Calypso. Like, she sort of keeps him there.
And he also kind of has to sleep with Circe as well, right? To save his men. Are those the only two instances we get of him cheating?
Well, okay,
like directly?
He certainly almost flirts with Nausicaa. So that's like the Phaeacians, like this kind of utopia sort of semi-godlike people who's like, the trees are always in bloom and they have super.
Is that the island of Sherry?
Is the island of Scheria, and they're the Phaeacians, yeah, and the king is Alcinous, and that's where he arrives. We first read, he kind of shows up on the shore, and she's down there doing her laundry, because Athena tells her to, and he sort of shows up naked, and he like grabs a leafy bush or something, and he's just like holding that to cover him. But like, I'm not sure if he's flirting, but he says she's like a goddess as well. It looks like a goddess and beautiful. But there is an interesting, so this is like book 5 or book 6, and at one point he says to her, like, I want you to find, he thanks her. He's like, thank you so much for like, bringing me to your family, give me clothes and stuff. And he goes, I want you to find a worthy husband. And he says, I want you to find a like-minded husband. It's like, the Greek word is homostraphone or something like that, which is this kind of like-mindedness. But I thought that was interesting early on that he was saying, and Homer was telling us, this seems to be the most important characteristic to have in this other partner, this kind of like-mindedness, or like similar values, or intellectual partner, or something like that.
Rather than like wide childbearing hips, or something.
Well, Athena does make Penelope a bit of a porg at one point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it says, like literally when he returns and she freshens her up a bit, and she says, "Make your skin white as ivory and thick." Like I think Emily Wilson used shapelier, but I've seen some translations use
Fatten up that ass.
thicker. Yeah. But yeah, but like rather than like Calypso, he's sort of conceding. Like Calypso, you're like you're more beautiful and you know live forever. But like, what's bringing him back to Penelope is perhaps this what he's told Nausicaa. You know, the most important value is this kind of like-mindedness, and I definitely think you know there's textual evidence to show that Penelope shares this kind of like-mindedness or some Odyssean type qualities. And that,
I mean, she's definitely clever, right? And so, like the whole unweaving of the shawl, I think is that what she tells the suitors when I'm done sewing this shawl, I guess you know I'll finally pick one of you, and then every evening she's actually secretly unsewing it so that it takes her many years.
But these are all like
so these sort of tricks,
right?
Are very
yeah. The test with the bow and arrow, which reveals who Odysseus is.
Yeah. Even her test for Odysseus, right? When she doesn't fully believe he's Odysseus because he's been in disguise, is this kind of trick. She tricks him about, oh, you know, we'll just move the bed, we'll just move it around for you. And he's like, wait, you can't do that, which is an interesting trick because it kind of doubles. I was thinking that it kind of doubles as like proof of fidelity as well, because like, I mean, unless she's playing like 40 chess, but like. Insofar as that works as a test for Odysseus, only Odysseus knows about the bed. So it shows no one else has been in the bed for the last 20 years. Yeah. Sorry, Benny, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to change slightly and just go back to the offer of immortality, which I find fascinating for whatever reason. But so he declines. And then what I think is interesting is, you know, Homer has him almost become godlike throughout the Odyssey, right? Mostly with Athena's help. So she's always ensuring that he wins battles, making him look like a god, you know, making him very strong, and often maybe growing his hair or enlarging his muscles, things like this. And so, you know, he declines this offer to actually become a god, and then actually gains all these sort of like godlike qualities in all these scenes throughout the book. And you know, I'm wondering if the lesson here is just something as simple as you should not aspire to be the gods themselves, but you should aspire to sort of like be like the gods as much as possible. But it's anathema for humans to actually try and, you know, become gods or like usurp the actual positions of gods and this sort of thing. So there, you know, because there's obviously a very clear separation between humans and gods in the Homeric world, but gods are much more human-like, as we discussed last time, than, you know, Judeo-Christian conceptions of gods or something. And so it's possible for mortals to try and, you know, sort of become more and more like the gods in various ways. And so it seems like that's maybe the ethic here. Like you should try and exert your will on the world as much as possible, without actually trying to be a god yourself, like not raise yourself to the level of a god.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's like a real vein of fatalism here and of knowing your place, which again doesn't gel or mesh very nicely with what I would consider the notion of heroism, which is sort of spitting in the eye of God, basically.
Yeah.
So, and another way in which like a simplistic Bronze Age mindset type reading of Homeric morality seems wrong to me, which is that like the idea of being an extraordinary man is to do exactly as you please and to have no masters above you and so on. But everyone in this book is just very different to the gods, and I think you're right, Benny, that there maybe is that warning that you shouldn't, that there's two classes of beings and sort of never the twain shall meet. Like the bit which I've noted down is when Eurylochus says, so they're on Helios's island and they've been told don't eat the cattle because that will seal your fate, you will all die. they're going hungry, they're fishing and scrounging food, waiting for the wind to change. And Eurylochus says, "I would prefer to drink the sea and die at once than perish slowly." And he's sort of invoking them to like eat the sun god's cattle, and then we'll ask forgiveness later, which is kind of like rock and roll, right? He's like, "Fuck the gods, like I don't care. I'm going to live like a man," which is what I would consider to be the Bap style morality. But in fact, in Homer's story, that's the wrong decision. That Poseidon sends a storm and they all die, and that, he shouldn't have done that. Whereas Odysseus is more like the goody scold who's being like, no, don't do that. We were told not to. We mustn't eat the cattle. There is like this class of beings who you must defer to. And the other interesting thing there, talking about, well, we haven't talked about yet, but like female characters, and we got a little bit into the gender politics last time, is that the most powerful man in this book is like a bug compared to the least god, really. Like Calypso and Circe both have not absolute power over Odysseus, but like he is their plaything to varying degrees. And then Athena is like the coolest, most badass character in this entire book by far. And she's a incredibly deadly skilled warrior, and she's a woman. And she's not like a pushover amongst the gods or a lesser god. She's like front and center. She's Zeus's daughter, sprung straight from his head. So that's interesting too, that like the best man is worse than the least female god even, right? And if you think that the ancient Greeks were, very patriarchal and so on, then I think that also tells you exactly how concrete that division is between mortals and the deathless gods.
Yeah, nice. The gods are very intriguingly egalitarian, right? So even the fact that Athena is able to petition Zeus to send Hermes to get Odysseus released from Ogygia, this is against Poseidon's wishes, right? And Poseidon, in some sense, is a higher god than Athena. Like he was of the original cast or the original generation of Olympians, right? He's sort of like Zeus's brother, and Zeus got the skies and Poseidon got the seas, and Hades got the underworld, and and Earth belongs to all three, and so these gods are sort of equal, and yet Athena is able to petition Zeus to basically overrule Poseidon, and so there's no sense that male
Such
gods
a daddy's
definitely.
Well, Zeus is the boss, right? But yeah, no. I mean, it is interesting, that the gods, both genders are. I think Athena herself is actually a little bit unclear sometimes, but often gets talked as a woman.
Wait, what do you mean? Athena is straight up a female, isn't she?
I thought. What do you mean?
She's in some portrayals she's a bit androgynous in some sense. She also has masculine traits. I mean, I think Wilson herself takes a political motive in which she talks around. She translates her as child of God rather than daughter of God. It says daughter of God, but I think she wants to emphasize that Athena. I think Athena is kind of an androgynous god, although mainly talked about, or always maybe talked about as a female. And this.
You mean her
story.
appearance is androgynous? Like she's got stick poke tattoos and like a baggy
Yeah.
sweater.
Just small tits or something. I don't know exactly, but I know there's like a take out there that Wilson herself, I think, feels, endorses as well. Yeah, I mean the other interesting thing is the gods just do a lot for the people, right? Like there is this take of like how much does Odysseus or Telemachus or whoever like deserve this kind of hero status, because like not all cases, but like almost all cases kind of like, well, the god did that or the god helped that, and you wouldn't have done that. I mean, at one point they talk about his impressiveness at Troy, and he did that himself. Like, he was the mastermind behind it, and disguised himself as a beggar and then and stuff. But like these days, I mean, there's even disguises, right? Which I don't love in this story. Like the gods just changing how people look. Like they make Odysseus like look old and shriveled, and then they just make him look like all powerful, and they turn Penelope into a like fresh pork, and like it's just a little bit weird. Like I don't.
What don't you like about it? Like cheating, like
Yeah, I just found it a bit
plot
cheating.
armor.
It's kind of like he gets home to his wife and it's about this like-mindedness, and then it's just like, oh yeah, make you both look like bomb ass, and I don't know, it just.
Some of it's weird, like when he gets to Ithaca and Athena disguises it so it looks like it's not Ithaca, and then she approaches him as a little girl, but then she's like, "Welcome back. Don't you recognize Ithaca?" It's like, what was the point of? Why are you fucking like? And why are you appearing as a little girl? Why not just be like, "Hey, it's your old friend Athena. We've interacted many times before." Anyway, let's get into the plot. It's like this extra elaborate. I think she's just showing off at this point.
Test in a minute. Yeah.
What was the test? Was there a test there?
I don't know.
Yeah,
because
he spins her a yarn.
Like, where am I? Yeah.
He pretends to be from Crete.
Yeah, right.
He's so good at coming up with like incredibly elaborate backstories on the fly, right? So we should talk about this as his central attribute, the Odyssean attribute specific to him that I don't know if all heroes share. Like I don't know if Achilles has it, which is that he's like a trickster and he is an amazing bullshitter. So when he gets to Ithaca, he is trying to keep his identity secret. Fortunately, Athena's given him this old man guise, which I'm imagining is like the jackass, bad grandpa kind of prosthetics. Yeah. So he visits his good, faithful slave. Is it Eumaeus? I can't remember his name. Eumaeus?
Yeah, Eumaeus.
And obviously he asked, "Where are you from, traveler?" And then Odysseus just like spins this huge convoluted yarn about how I can't even remember what it was.
But he's got like details, right? It's
yeah.
not, yeah. It seems plausible.
When he meets Penelope, he tells her this like long ass fake story, and like, yeah, he's just able to effortlessly trick people and fool people.
Even right at the end when he talks to his dad, right? He tricks him as well.
Yeah. And some of it seems excessive. Some of it seems like, okay, yeah. I mean, he's doing the loyalty tests and stuff. Those bits make sense, or he has to conceal his identity. But I think he like revels in it and is even proud of it. There was one bit where I thought the text even suggested that like lying is fine and good or admirable. I'll just see if I wrote it down or not. Well, in any case, like he's not that embarrassed to be called like.
Is it talking about his grandfather? Because when it flashes back when he's a young kid and how he gets a scar, they mention his grandfather, and he was the lord of the thieves and lord of oaths, or I think Wilson calls him lord of thieves and lord of oaths. But like that's his epithet, which Odysseus inherits a little bit. But like there's this impressiveness there.
The guy who named him the unlikable one because he's like, I don't like anyone either. So
yeah,
the boy named Sue.
I did read this cool fun little thing around Odysseus's scar. So like he has this scar on his leg, and which gets recognized by the old nurse slave Eurycleia, which also like made me think. Because at one point, Penelope offers someone to clean Odysseus. And he's like, "Do you have someone old, like an old woman?" And she's like, "Yeah, I got just a person." And then like this person is the one that raised Odysseus. And she's washing his feet and then recognizes the scar and knows that it must be Odysseus. And he's like, "Make sure you keep this quiet because I'm going to ambush everyone."
No, he doesn't say that. He says, "If you let the secret out, I'll fucking kill you. And I don't care that I used to like feed from your breast and you raised me." Another little moment where I'm like, man, this guy kind of sucks.
Yeah. But I did see this cool little bit of commentary around his scar being like what is used to identify Odysseus. And then it goes to this backstory of how he got it. And he's this young kid and he's boar hunting, with his elders. And he goes out, he can't wait, and the others hold back. The adults hold back, and he's this young kid, and he can't wait, and he goes to hit the boar, and the boar kind of gets the better of him, and he gets a scar. But like the very thing that identifies him, like that's not very prototypical. Like, that's not very typical of Odysseus. Like Odysseus, part of Odysseus' virtue, as well as these, wiles and cleverness, is this kind of like patience. Like a lot of the times, like it's his men that like are not patient, and that they want to feast, and they want the cattle and stuff like that. And he has this restraint, and even when he gets home as well, like he disguises himself, and he has this restraint. Like he doesn't say who he is, even with his wife. Like at one point, it's saying like his sort of heart's beating a bit, but like he keeps it cool, and he just knows like he needs to get the job done. But like the very scar that this comment was, the very scar that identifies him is this kind of inversion of what he is, and I suppose what he's grown out of. When he was young.
Of impulsivity.
Yeah, impulsivity, right? Scar of impulsivity, which I thought was kind of nice.
Why does he hide his identity for so long when he gets back? Like, what is the point here? I was getting kind of frustrated reading these last few chapters, honestly, when he just wouldn't tell anyone, because I couldn't quite
I am Odysseus.
what the point here was. I mean, I can understand not revealing yourself to the suitors so that you can effectively ambush them, but to not reveal himself to Penelope, and it took him a long time to reveal himself to his own son, to his father, etc. The only person he trusts, and still after quite a long time, is sort of the older slave hand, I guess. I forget his name, but and he's the kind of the only person that knows for a long time. And so like what was going on here? He had opportunities to let people know who he was. And so is there just there can't just be in and of itself a virtue of deception? Presumably it's for some sort of reason, right?
Just constant lying and trickery.
Yeah, exactly.
Wherever you go. Never say who you are. Yeah. Well, and part of it's he's testing loyalty, right? I think to contrast again to Agamemnon, who gets home and gets ambushed. And like so sure. he can't necessarily trust everyone, so he wants to test the loyalty of the slave hand, and who kind of passes with flying colors, and he wants to test the loyalty of even of his son and of Penelope. Like he can't trust everyone. It's not just the suitors, and he wants to test everyone's loyalty. And then I think that's the main reason why. I mean, unless your question is like, he did it a bit long.
Yeah, I think it took him long, and I don't think he really tested. So he definitely tests the loyalty of like the slaves that are still working for them, because he wants to know that they'll be on his side when it comes to the fight, and so that's all practical and makes sense. But he doesn't really test Telemachus's loyalty, and presumably Penelope's is spoken of for like her loyalty should be evident from the fact that she hasn't married anyone else and has waited 20 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose.
I think he wants the opportune moment, right? Which is another big thing in Greek philosophy, is like waiting, like what you were saying, Cam, is patience, and then striking at the exact moment. And I think that would be, and the idea would be that you don't want anyone to preemptively give you away, or maybe like inadvertently reveal that you know who they are, right? Because his plan does hinge on, so just to cover the incredibly sophisticated plan that he and Telemachus and Athena hatch up together, which is like comic book level silly, but basically the suitors are all invited into the hall. They lock, he gets the slaves to lock the doors. He and Telemachus hide their weapons, except for they leave themselves like a sword and a spear for themselves. And then that's when Penelope does the contest with who can string Odysseus's bow, right? To see which suitor is worthy of her.
Cinderella shoe contest, kind of.
Yeah. And Odysseus strings it. He's the only one who can. And then am I right in saying he immediately just starts?
Yeah, I think he shoots Alcinous first.
Well, kind of puts a weapon in his hand, right? Yeah, gets Alcinous
through the neck or something.
Through the neck.
And then he gets Antinous in the throat, and he gets
Antinous, right?
Eurymachus in the nipple or some shit.
In the nipple, yeah. That's right. Yeah, he just starts slaughtering them. Athena comes and fights by his side, which seems extra unfair.
And she makes the stuff as well, where she kind of like, he's like Matrix dodging. Maybe I misread that, but I feel like
she makes them all their arrows miss for sure. Yeah.
Because otherwise, one guy versus hundreds a bit. But yeah, they do hide the weapons, right? And I think Telemachus fucks up there as well, which is interesting. What we were talking about before about him kind of being a fail son. He's like, you got one job, mate. He's like, move all the weapons, and then he like doesn't lock it.
Yeah.
He like, doesn't lock them away, and then they get
Someone
in and they get
sneaks
some
in
armor.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it just
then, his
annoyed
dad
about
has to come up with a plan to save him, right?
I know.
He's like, oh
Yeah,
shit, someone
exactly.
got into the weapon store. Dad, what do we do? And then Odysseus has to come up with a plan to catch this guy.
And his first thought is he's been betrayed. I think he's like, someone must have, one of my loyalty tests didn't work. And then Telemachus, I mean, maybe to his credit, he admits it. He's like, no, sorry, Dad.
My bad.
Which is maybe an impressive form of growth. I don't know.
Yeah. You do get the sense that Odysseus is losing it a little bit. He is very paranoid and cynical and jumping at shadows, I think. I don't think it's a stretch to read that into the text, that he is being portrayed as going too far and of losing control somewhat and of not being perfectly reasonable in all these crazy tests that he's making everyone do and all these like convoluted plans that he's coming up with.
Especially when he's ready to kill all the townsfolk, right? I mean, he's literally their king. And presumably part of the reason he wanted to return home was to take up the mantle of leading these people again. And then as soon as he gets home, he's ready to kill them all instead of trying to bargain or talk them down or anything. And, throughout the whole book, he's portrayed as this very clever trickster who can talk himself out of most situations. So presumably there would have been a way for him to talk the townsfolk down, get them to lay down their arms. But he's ready. He's ready to fight at that point. He's just going to keep slaughtering people.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is the Bronze Age mindset of like, that's not necessarily as bad a thing as it sounds to us. But I didn't read him as
literally his denizens, right? That's what's so odd.
Well, I know there's maybe I'm. Yeah.
Well, the suitors all had families. Like some of the suitors were from Ithaca, for instance.
For sure.
They weren't all foreigners.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't read him as necessarily paranoid though, as well. I mean, we know from our vantage point, we know Penelope is not going to betray him. But it definitely, I think it sets up in contrast that he really has to worry about this. Like this is, and like Agamemnon congratulates him at the end. He's like, like thank God, like you're so lucky, kind of like. But like that's what could have happened, I suppose.
Yeah. Yep. That's true.
Yeah. Fair enough. Where do you guys land on the slaughter of the suitors? And maybe I'll broaden the question out a bit. Like, where do you land on Odysseus as a person?
As
good
a
guy?
Complicated?
I mean, to be honest, Odysseus confuses me a bit. Maybe to just start with the suitor question, though. I mean, I think the most straightforward reading there is simply that revenge is okay when people have actually done you harm. And I think, coveting another man's wife in this case is viewed as just, a bad thing. And so I think I think Homer's writing it thinking that the reader is going to be very sympathetic with the death of the suitors, and then possibly thinking killing the townsfolk is too much. But I didn't get the sense in the narration that we should be like hesitant to see the suitors killed. I got the sense that we should sort of be elated that they're finally getting what's coming to them. Odysseus as a hero for me is a bit less clear. I mean, I think had this been written in the modern day, I think you would have seen a slightly different arc. So I think you would have seen something like Odysseus doing something maybe in the Trojan War or something that would have like earned him the respect of the gods. And then that would have won Athena over to his side. And then Athena would have helped him get home because he had like done this, good deed, whatever that good deed had been. But that's not really how it unfolds, right? We're not really privy to the reason why Athena favors Odysseus so much. We're just told that she's sort of been on his side from the beginning. She also, I guess, was helping him kill people during the Trojan War and beforehand. So she's sort of just chosen him as a human to favor, which is pretty arbitrary, right?
A quick bit of background context is that I think Aphrodite supports Troy in the Trojan War because, like, Paris, the good-looking brother that takes Helen, like, she kind of loves him, and like he chooses her over Hera and Athena, I think. And then they're like, well, fuck Troy. We'll go with the Greeks then. And then like Ares is that the war god. He's like married to Aphrodite, so he supports Troy. So I think there's a little bit of background of like why they chose. But yeah, I think also like,
but that doesn't tell you why they chose
just
Odysseus
becomes,
out of all. The Greeks,
Odysseus just becomes like her favorite. I think maybe because he's maybe like Athena, right? He's like clever and impressive.
But my point is, she also bolsters his cleverness and his impressiveness, right? He wouldn't be nearly as impressive.
Look how great he
without
is.
the
Look how
help
great
of
my
God.
son is. You're doing it all.
Yeah, look how great he is.
Yeah.
Like, look how jacked he is when she, he's just eating
You
pigs
literally
on
made
Circe's island for a year. Like, presumably, him and his men would get fat without the intervention of the gods. And so I think that's what I struggle with the most, is kind of, there seems to just be like an inherent arbitrariness built into all of like the who is a hero, who dies, who wins, who are we supposed to look at with fondness, who are we supposed to dislike. And yeah, it's a little hard for me to get around that arbitrariness. I think some of the big moral themes we touched on last time a bit, and like I think some of them are clear, but just in terms of who the gods favor, why, like, yeah, it's hard for me to get around that sort of arbitrariness.
Also, Athena kind of puts her feet up for a bit. Like, it's Hermes actually that's helping him when he's away. Like, Hermes comes in and convinces Calypso to go, and then Hermes goes to Circe's island and like said, and like Athena's kind of just like, and as soon as Odysseus gets back, Athena's like, okay, I'm here also, now, and yeah.
Also, she disappears when he's about to drown. When Poseidon's wrecked his ship, and now he's trying to swim to Sherry and he almost drowns, and it's only because of the goddess Ino, I think, who gives him this scarf or whatever that he can float on. So yeah, it is weird. It's like she abandons him sometimes. Yeah, I don't know. Where do you guys come down on Odysseus?
I mean, probably similar to you guys. I think like he's pretty cool. And here's the
it's from the guy who also loves Tony Soprano and thinks Tony Soprano is a hero.
But yeah, like, I mean, Bronze Age morality is not the same as our current morality. So you sort of have to just be mindful of that, really.
The big difference is like the expansion of moral circles, right? Which the Christian victim morality falls under, I think. We're like, if you think about like modern heroes, like superheroes, they are so milquetoast and neutered, but I think that is because we can no longer have this kind of conquest. But it's interesting because like I think valorizing like Odyssean exploits or heroism is interesting, like descriptively. I do feel some resonance there that this is what it should be, or not what it should be, what it is to be a man in the fullest sense, or a person to have like full dominion. The extraordinary man stuff, the judge's morality from Blood Meridian, Satan and Paradise Lost. I think it is kind of interesting and true, and it's hard to remember in our modern context because none of us are free like that. But I like seeing it represented like this. It's not something that I want to have, and our world would be kind of nightmarish if we did have the more Bronze Age style morality. So like, I'm really glad that we live in that world, but I think it's interesting to recognize it as, in my view, a kind of an accurate depiction of masculinity and human nature. And then the question in modernity and with civilization becomes like, how do we redirect those impulses? And I think like we do redirect them pretty well with like sports and entrepreneurship, and startups seem to be like some of the more obvious modern things. Like Elon Musk is clearly this type of a guy. I think I've said before, I think he's like pretty shitty person, but he's also a great man. Trump is a great man, but not a good man. These kind of people, they are able to exert their will to power in the world if it maybe like with Trump, maybe you'd say like a less destructive way than they might otherwise have if they actually were out conquering countries or something. And then with Musk in an actual net positive way where maybe he does some bad things, but on the whole, he's like makes an amazing positive impact on the world. But you have to recognize those impulses and try to not fully neuter them and try to not deny their existence. I think. And that's something where I kind of think reading Bronze Age Pervert's actually quite interesting, or people from this actual age, to get just to get a wildly different perspective of what it is to be a fully a fully formed, fully embodied person in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that through the lens of constraints, which seems to be the difference among some of the characters you mentioned. So if you take it at face value that like one of the things you should try and do is sort of maximize your agency in the world, which seems to be one of the lessons of the Odyssey, right? Like you should take things into your own hands and try and be as agentic as possible. Then in the Odyssey's case, that's all subject to the will of the gods. So that's like the constraining system. So you should try and be as agentic as possible, unless the gods have prohibited you from doing something, in which case you better listen to them. The judge in Blood Meridian basically has no constraints. And I think that's what makes him such an evil character, right? Like, because he's just trying to totally maximize his own agency, divorced even from what he thought 5 seconds ago. He's just like an unleashed cannon on the world, which makes him so sadistic and difficult to predict and dangerous. And you might argue something similar about Trump, right? Like, he's also sort of divorced from what he even thought or said 5 seconds ago and doesn't seem to respect any sort of constraints, right? And so, if your ethic is something like maximize agency in the world, it's interesting to ask, like, subject to what? Like, what, subject to what sort of constraints? And at least in the Odyssey, there's something like godlike constraints, whereas for some of these other characters,
and maybe some social constraints too, right? Like your legacy and your people's perception of you. Whereas the judge could not give a fuck about what anyone thinks about it.
Yeah, nice.
I suppose to separate like the judge and like Extraordinary Man of Nietzsche from Bronze Age hero is what they have in common, I suppose, is that they don't have this kind of egalitarian care of like, the victims that we kind of have probably from this Christian ethic, which is now just part of secular kind of humanism. But yeah, where they differ is there are these constraints, whether it be the gods or these other kind of socially constructed virtues.
Yeah.
It is. I do find it hard to grok just like reading the history and like the prehistory of humanity. Of just like, it's just all conquers, man. Like it's like when Odysseus says that we just went there and we conquered this place, and like when you read the kind of ancient DNA and stuff, like it's just like it's groups of people just conquering other people, right? And it's so foreign to our current norms of morality. And it's interesting that we've got these texts that somewhat capture it, although isn't as deep as our history goes.
And necessarily written by the victors, right? Especially in this case.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we wrap up here? I got to go pretty.
The last thing I want to say is that you guys have, with the examples you've brought, have sort of halfway convinced me that this entire text is actually like a marshmallow test homily, is like the ancient Greek marshmallow test. Because like everything in there actually boils down to not letting your based instincts steer you away from what is the ultimate good or the higher good or even just the more strategic choice. And including his, like the whole point of him coming home, right? And then when he comes home, not immediately going up to Penelope and embracing her, which would be the thing that you'd want to do, but taking the hard choice and putting off the reconciliation, and like everything about it is about behaving like tactically and imposing these constraints on yourself to get what you want. It's fascinating. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that at all. Well, I'd thought about the sirens and that thing as a sort of a mini bit, but I think maybe the whole book is kind of about that, really.
Yeah, it's a massive theme. Someone else was talking about the other big thing I took away, which I mentioned, was this kind of like-mindedness, this homophony or something that Penelope and Odysseus have, and that just being an important value in a relationship. That that was something new I took away from this reading.
Yeah, and that all of this stuff is like really nuanced and quite impressively so. It's not at all. I mean, there's all the bloodthirsty killing and conquest, but it's not simplistic at all. that's also been quite surprising for me. Like, it's really sophisticated in all kinds of ways. Storytelling, the morality, some of the plot beats and arcs, and the messaging. It's not as simple as like other texts of this era. Like the Old Testament feels like less sophisticated than this.
Yeah.
We'll have to do that next time.
We should.
It'd be interesting to read the Bible, to be honest. I can only imagine what it would be like to have. So you have certain characters that are looking as hard as they can for meaning in the Bible. So I put like Jordan Peterson in this camp, for instance, and he's obviously extremely good at it, like extremely talented. And I think he's probably eking more out of the Bible than is actually there, and is more than it deserves. But, you know, he tells these compelling stories about it. And, you know, that's fine. It would be interesting if he was to attack the Odyssey in the same way. Like, I kind of agree with you that there's probably more there that you could extract if you had these very and I'm sure there are these dedicated scholars who try and do the same thing, but Peterson obviously has a knack for doing it in a very public-facing, provocative way that gets him a lot of attention. And I'm not actually that familiar with his, you know, biblical writings and whatnot, but, you know, he's persuaded a lot of people and written a lot about it, and it would just be fascinating to have someone do the same for the Odyssey.
My prior is kind of more to the Bible, for no other reason. It's like it's a much bigger book.
Yeah, at least it's longer.
Yeah. We should read at least a couple of the interesting books from the Bible. Although I think the New Testament's more interesting. We definitely should do that at some point.
Are we keen to do the Iliad at some point?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Achilles in here, who makes another fascinating appearance, which cuts against the idea of bloodthirsty pillage being the point of your existence.
And it seems to go against the Iliad, eh? I mean, Achilles says, because he gets met in the underworld, and he says, well, you went with such glory, and Achilles said he'd rather just be a swineherd or something, you know, than the lord of everyone in the underworld. Which is maybe a bit of evidence that they're different authors. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say it's kind of a mixed message, because he says that, and then immediately after, he asks Odysseus about his son, and Odysseus is telling him about what an amazing warrior he is and how he's slaughtering all his foes, and Achilles like leaps away with like a spring in his step, so he's still like absolutely stoked.
Yeah. It's funny, it doesn't take long to figure him that, you know, he's living as a ghost and he hates it, and it's just like this. But as soon as you start talking about battles, age, it's like, definitely failed the Marshmallow test again.
But again, fascinating, right? To have that contradiction embodied right there.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up. So we probably don't have time for listener feedback today. You got to go, Benny?
I got to go pretty quick, unless it's on the shorter side, I guess.
I think it doesn't require us to address it, so maybe I'll just read it out.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is a message from Joe, who says he started listening a few months ago. He thought the Christmas wrap-up episode was great, and he mostly wants to say keep it up and great work. He came across the pod because he was looking for some views on David Foster Wallace, but he knows Cam through uni friends in Wellington, and was very surprised once he linked his voice back to his person. So a big thank you to the Spotify search algorithm also. That's so funny. That's hilarious. He says, looking forward to the Blood Meridian episodes, assuming you release them. Yes, we will. They will be out by the time you hear this. Just listen to the Moviegoer episode. You guys have got me thinking it might just be worth reading, despite your general consensus. Don't do it.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, my God. That's too funny. Our negative experience.
But he is going to check out The Razor's Edge, which I think wouldn't be as...
Oh, yeah. Definitely read The Razor's Edge. Razor's Edge was great. Yeah.
He's excited to read some Ted Chiang and Crime and Punishment, and references to The Razor's Edge and David Foster Wallace placed them high on my to-read list. Yep. That sounds great. And awesome. He also makes a suggestion for us, which is an existentialist book I think you would at least dissect well, if not enjoy, is The Tunnel by Ernesto Sabato. Camus appears to have liked it, and it's a quick read.
I hadn't even heard of that one.
No,
I've actually got a copy of that, so we should look into it.
Well,
yeah, it's very short as well.
Yeah, Cam will love it.
We've gone literally weeks without reading an existentialist book.
Yeah, let's do it. That'd be
Well,
fun.
Joe
Yeah.
might also like our next book, Don DeLillo,
Yeah.
White Noise, if he wants to grab it.
Yeah, so Benny, you picked that one out. Do you want to say a little word about that if people want to pick it up and read along with us?
I don't know if I have much to say. Our next book is White Noise by Don DeLillo. Do I know what it's about? No. It was ranked high on our massive spreadsheet of books, and I own it, which was a particularly
Athena told you to read it.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
First time I've done it.
and White Noise also the working title for this podcast. Before we found out that Cam is part indigenous.
Oh, I thought you were actually talking about our bad sound quality.
I was like,
Yeah.
that's too funny. Imagine that as the podcast title. You'd be fighting with all the White Noise soundtracks on Spotify.
Yeah, SEO would be completely fucked. Or someone downloads it and tries to go to sleep and they just hear these horrible
What
New
the
Zealand
fuck is
accents.
That was like on the top of my Spotify Wrapped one year, which was like white noise. But now they've taken it out of the algorithm as
Nice.
your favorite songs. Then it's white noise and rain noises.
Nice.
Cool.
All right.
Sweet. Anyway, thanks to Joe for writing in. He says, your podcast is already great and likely will only get better. The vibe's positive and I love knowing there's a curated list of books to read that have some great discussion to listen to after. So it's fun that people are kind of doing it in that way as well, like taking some inspo for their reading list. So yeah, if you want to write in, we love to get messages like this, or with any, if you want to weigh in on the Odyssey, I'd love to hear what you thought we got right or wrong, or any other ideas that you have. You can write to us at doyouevenlit@gmail.com. There's been some more confusion about this lately. Someone was trying to email that address and couldn't get it through. It's DOUEVENLIT. Just the letter U, not the word U. Some other motherfucker is parking on that domain, which is insane. I have no idea why they have it, but there it is. So write in, doyouevenlit, just the letter U @gmail.com.
Or send that other email account a bunch of spam to get them to delete their account. That would also.
No, apparently I suggested that, but apparently it's bouncing back. It's like, I don't know, a server error or something. What does that mean? Does that mean they're not even using the address?
Yeah, that's odd. I mean, normally that would mean the address is not it's not serviceable, like it's not in action.
Yeah.
But you can't get it. So
maybe I should try get it again.
Yeah.
We have to change our name.
We'll change the email again for the fourth time.
Yeah. Okay, now it's
Well, we could keep both maybe.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sweet. Yep. See you guys in a couple of weeks. White Noise.
Sweet. See ya.
Bye-bye.